and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me as always is the person who reads all about it,
Sarah.
And today we're doing a two-player perspective and accessibility for Extra Extra. Now if you want to see our opinion, check out our other video, Rolling with Reviews, Extra Extra. Sarah, tell us a bit about this game.
All right, Extra Extra is all about completing pages of a newspaper. Players place their reporters on the news that they want to publish, but they can be outbid by other players. Other worker placement spots include gaining copy and photo cuttings, hiring more reporters, and even selling news to raise more capital. Whoever completes their pages first receives a bonus, but will that player have enough circulation points to win? All right, Will, so how does the game change for two players?
So for two players, you're going to block off certain spots so that not all the spaces are going to be available to you. There is no bot, so it's essentially like a little dead Nanaman on the spots. But you can cover his murder, so good for you.
Yay.
That's about it for a two-player game.
So issues at a two-player count is, well, bumping of other players is really not a thing.
There are a lot of spaces to choose from, and
even with the ones they block off.
Yeah, and very few reporters in your area. Like when you start the game, you only have 2 reporters to even place. You can hire more, up to 5, but then that will cost you money to retain them.
Yeah.
So there's just not a lot of competition for space.
No, and usually you can end up doing whatever it is you want to do without having to bump. I think maybe you bumped one of my guys once?
Yeah, and the way you do that is when you put your worker out there, you'll throw money out there to kind of lock up the spot. And if someone else needs to take that spot and bump you, they'll put their worker, but they'll have to put more money, and then all that gets refunded to you.
Right.
So you get your money and you get your worker back. And then if it goes back and forth, and whoever wants to pay the most to lock that spot up, that's when they get it. And when it's resolved, the money goes back to the bank.
Right. And so since in a two-player game, you're really, there's no reason to do that for the most part. It also means money is less important because there's not that many ways to use money otherwise. You're using it to pay your reporters, and I feel like there's things. I think there's something else you can buy. But now I'm not remembering.
Was it a stringer?
Yeah.
Card?
I think there was some cards you could buy. But for the most part, you mainly use the money as the bidding part. It's not like a true bidding, but it is kind of. But if you're not doing that in a two-player count because you don't really need to, then yeah, you don't need the money.
Yeah, because when it comes to the stories, you're using the story cards in your hand to help pay for those.
Yes.
It's not a money-based thing.
No. And so because of these things that we're talking about, the game lacks any tension at a two-player count, because that's where the tension is. Can I do the actions I need to do so that I can complete my newspaper and win?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I guess what it does well, though, is, well, you have more agency because you can do what you want. You have you're like maybe a local newspaper.
And I'm a local newspaper. We don't really have much I mean, there might be the occasional big national news story that we might cover.
But like I'm covering nature and you're covering sports. I don't know. It's just, there's no tension, but you can do what you want, and it's really open. And weirdly, I usually am fine with that in games, but
it's actually something you prefer.
I prefer it, but for this game, it just undermines the whole game.
Yes.
So I think you're going to know where we're going with this in our review.
Yes.
But you'll have to watch the video to find out more. So let's move on to accessibility. The rules are really hard to learn because they kind of did this weird piecemeal method.
Yeah, they broke the whole game up into what they call scenarios. And scenarios will either determine your own little play area space, or they'll throw in some extra things that aren't in the initial setup.
Right.
And it's a way to ease you into the bigger game, kind of like a tutorial.
Right.
But the way they do it is like, ignore this, ignore this, ignore this. And then they just teach you all the rules anyway.
Right. So the problem is The rule book goes from the beginning to the end, full, complete, comprehensive rules. So you, as a beginner, are trying to do scenario 1, and it says ignore, feels like 90% of the game. Ignore it. So then the problem is you're reading the rules for the first time, and you're like, okay, I think I'm supposed to ignore this step. Am I supposed to ignore this sub-phase too? So it was just very, very confusing on it. They didn't piecemeal then the rules. So, I mean, I kind of get why they didn't, but it also makes it very complicated.
Yeah,
So-
it needed a bit more subdividing, or at least designations of to skip this if you're
Right.
playing scenario blah blah.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been much better.
Yes.
So yeah.
It reported poorly on the news.
Yeah. The extra cards in the features deck is identified by icons only, and this is only going to be really difficult for those with severe vision issues like Will, because all the other cards are identified by a name, I think usually in the upper right corner.
Yeah, and in the upper right-hand corner, they'll say sports or leisure or
Right.
politics, world.
But for the extra, it just has the words extra in the corner, but on the left-hand corner are 2 icons, and that's the information you really need to know.
Right.
Is those 2 icons. Granted, if you've got just colorblind accessibility issues, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, they have fairly distinct icons
Right.
for sports, politics, world,
cetera.
business, so on.
Yep. The board layout. This is one of the most confusing boards. They went heavy graphic design, but very poor graphic design. And it's just very confusing on the user interface.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pictures that just don't matter. They do have arrows.
Yep.
So that when you finish an area to resolve, you do go to the next area, you follow the arrows. However, the arrows go all over 3 different boards.
Yep. So you've got these 3 boards. So you've got to put them together in the right order. And that's the order in which you resolve all the actions on the board. Now, the order in resolving actions is important, as we found out in one game where he got to resolve getting a headline.
Yeah, that resolved before a story, and which is what you needed to finish. So that whole difference was 5 points, which is what I won by.
Right. So that is a nuanced thing that you would learn as you play the game more, if you play the game more.
Yeah.
The colors of the meeples may be challenging for colorblind players. They unfortunately this is an older game, so they went with the more traditional colors of the red, yellow, purple, blue. Was that green? I think there was light green. So, yeah, they picked some dark colors and they picked some light colors that might be very similar to each other.
Yeah.
And very lastly, probably one of the most dangerous components I've ever had to handle in a board game. Triangular cardboard pieces.
Tiny.
Tiny.
Yeah.
So you think 4-sided dice are dangerous? No, these things that make 4-sided dice run for their money, because these are clipping tokens. They're supposed to be like cameras and typewriters. But you need 2 clippings to make a whole symbol. But they cut them instead of just doing a half, like it's a square and you just cut it in half, so that makes it a rectangle, 2 rectangles.
They diagonally
They
cut
made
it.
it diagonal, so you've got these 3 very sharp corners on every single tiny little piece that will poke your fingers every time you try to pick them up. So, probably the worst component I have seen in a board game for danger reasons.
Yes.
All right, so what the game does right, accessibility, the icons are unique. We'll give them that. They did a really good job. There's the camera, there's the typewriter, then the 6 different sports, world, blah,
Business,
blah.
politics.
Those are all
leisure.
unique. So, and anything else, there's a few other icons that I'm forgetting at the moment that they're all unique. So they do a really good job there. And most of the cards are labeled with words, except for the extra cards. You need the sub information of the icons. Everything is open information, except you're supposed to keep your cards secret. And Will did for our plays because it is kind of important.
Yeah. There's a few times I was like, okay, what is this icon? It really didn't change
Too
what she
much,
was doing because,
yeah.
like we said, there's not a lot of tension on the board because the board is so open with how many spaces are just available
Yeah.
to choose from.
At least the 2-player count.
Yeah.
All right, that's everything.
All right, for 2 players, would you recommend?
Coach, no, I would not. This is for someone who typically doesn't like a lot of high tension or competition. I found this experience very, very bland.
Yes.
It was not engaging at all.
Yeah, it is a very meh experience at a 2-player. Do not recommend.
Yeah.
Accessibility.
It's going to be mostly, yes, your issues are going to be rules learning, the meeple colors, and the hidden card information. And those are going to hit various people in various ways. Those are really going to be your only major challenges.
Yeah, I think in its peer group, which is older Euro games, it's actually better accessibility-wise than most old Euro games. I mean, when we say old, we're not talking as old as some of these Euro games. This is like maybe 2017, 19?
Something like that.
Yeah, so it's not
like.
terribly old. It just has that feeling of an older
It definitely
Euro game.
has older sensibilities than necessarily its print run.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. And that'll do it for us. And Sarah,
Yes.
what's the most exciting thing about newspapers for you?
The cartoons?
Well, there is a little cartoon you can add to your paper.
Yes, there are little cartoons you can add to your papers. I mean, I know a lot of people say the crossword puzzle, but
It has that too.
Don't usually do the crossword puzzles. What about you?
Lining bird cages.
Paper mache.
Ooh.
That's the best use of newspapers.
Yes. And why would you ever roll with just one when you can be
Rolling with two?
If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with Two, that's TWO. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Discord, we have a channel on Tabletop Express. Check the show notes for the invite link.
If you have time, check out the other content Nanaman has found for you, because remember, he's rolling with you.